Hey, welcome everyone. I'm Chip Buck, co-founder and CTO at SaaS Alerts, joined by Ben Jones, who plays a bunch of roles for us, and one of them being our resident black hat. So he does a lot of hacking research for us, and he's going to participate later on when we do a live demo on session token hijacking. Jim Lippy, my co-founder and CEO, is also with us, so we should be able to handle anyone's questions at the end of the presentation. And we're hosted by Michelle Katz, and we'll get started now. So the topic of today's call is session token hijacking and business email compromise. I'm Chip Buck, co-founder and CTO here at SaaS Alerts. We're going to take you through about 9 or 10 slides, then jump into a live demo, and have time after for Q&A, so that we can really dive into this topic. All the information that we're going to go through today, we can make available to SaaS Alerts partners. And hopefully, those of you who are technically oriented will be interested in the details of how Ben performed the session token hack today, and even run down that journey for yourself, show it to your customers, and help you advance your business. So our agenda, first we're going to talk through the context of why token theft is an important topic, and the main context is business email compromise. Last year in 2023, SaaS Alerts recognized and prevented over 7,000 of these types of attacks. They really ratcheted up over the course of the year, so we think this is an important topic to cover in a fair amount of depth. We're going to cover how you identify BEC, what steps to take if you or your customers fall victim to that, some loss prevention topics to discuss, and then the live demo itself. So let's dive right in. So what is a business email compromise? It's defined as an unauthorized user gaining access to an account and then using that account to impersonate the legitimate owner of the account to perform seemingly legitimate communications with other people, and then that perpetuates the cycle. Who is the attacker? We've seen a lot of change in this over the 2.5 years, 3 years now that SaaS Alerts has been in the market. Most commonly, obviously, the attacker is an external threat actor, and they've become specialists in executing the initial phase of the attack, which is harvesting the credentials or gaining access. The initial attacker then typically sells, or may have already been hired just to perform that role, onto a specialist for the secondary phases of the attack, which occur later. The attacker might also be somebody inside the same business domain. That's sort of the second and third layers of how BECs work. Once someone is in, they're going to begin communicating internally. And it could also be an otherwise trusted vendor or customer. The phases are really pretty straightforward. Credential harvesting is the first step. This used to be done with password spray attacks, brute force attacks. We saw a big shift in 2023 to the session token theft being the primary mechanism for how these attacks are carried out. After that initial access occurs, that attacker who gains access then offers the session token, or if it's a sort of an old school brute force or password spray, the username and password to the secondary attacker, who is going to come in, live off the land. They're going to make very subtle changes to the email profile. They're going to look for patterns of communication between the owner of the account, the legitimate owner, the colleagues, the customers, and vendors. They're going to often try and escalate account permissions, and then they're going to execute as much fraud as they can get away with. They're hoping for more than one fraud from a single account, but certainly try and get away with one. The consequences of these attacks are really devastating. First off, they're typically not discovered for up to 200 days after the initial account compromise. The way they're often discovered is a customer calls up to follow up on a late payment notice, and you discover, well, they've already paid. Or a vendor calls looking for a payment from your company or your client's company, and that company has already paid. Senior executives request payment for goods or services. They get a bogus request. A controller or a bookkeeper follows through with that request because they believe it legitimately came from someone inside the organization. The costs of business email compromise can be in the tens of thousands of dollars for a small company, up to multi-millions of dollars. The average cost of a BEC in 2022, that's the latest statistics that were available from the FBI, was $5 million. The biggest bulk of the costs comes in the legal and investigative costs that can come after the attack is recognized and the follow-on consequences to additional parties are added up. Annually, the FBI estimates that U.S. businesses are bearing a cost of about $2 billion per year in business email compromise. So how do you identify one of these events early in the phase? The most important thing is that you need continuous observation of the account behavior so that you can recognize activity that isn't common, something that doesn't fit the regular pattern of the account usage, setting up email forwarding rules, forwarding to external addresses, redirection of folders. And I'll point this out when we jump over into the demo itself. And you can see we've set up some indicators of what this could look like in my own Outlook. Modifying MFA methods. And that can be adding simply a new authentication method, something that people used to commonly use like SMS, or adding a new authenticator app. Modifying account and administrator roles. So if it is a BEC that attacks successfully an administrative account, you'll often see a request to other administrators to escalate privileges. And then, of course, accessing the accounts from unusual locations. In 2023, one of the primary locations we saw this activity coming from was Nigeria. That was through about the first 9 months of the year, and then all of a sudden it dropped off significantly, almost as if the attackers shifted their focus because they realized, you know what, people sort of cotton on to the game, that this is where these things are coming from. And watching for new devices is an important step in maintaining vigilance to trying to prevent these kinds of attacks and recognize them when they happen. So any of the activities that we discussed, whether it's just a simple logging in or adding in an email folder or an email redirection, taken on their own, they may not be the indicator of attack. Of course, people have the options of managing their accounts in those ways. But when you observe a bunch of different items together at the same time, those can be built together to a single indicator of compromise. When you catch these early, you can typically resecure the account prior to a loss actually occurring. Okay, so let's jump into a demo of the session token. So we're using a new feature in Zoom here. If you go to your screen sharing settings or your view settings at the top of the page, you should be able to drop that down. And you'll see that there are two different options. Ben is actually sharing his screen as well. And obviously I'm sharing mine. So we'll give everybody a second to try and identify that, and hopefully you can toggle back and forth. The goal here is to show you what this looks like from both the attacker's viewpoint and the person being attacked. So with that said, I'm going to start by flipping over to Outlook. Ben has sent me a pretty legitimate looking file share resignation letter. Ben, you're not planning on going anywhere, are you? I don't think you are. You'll notice that these emails can be really, really specifically crafted. This Microsoft privacy link at the bottom, this is legit. If I click on this, it's going to drop me into Microsoft's privacy statement. Wow, that looks nice and secure. I feel pretty good about that. But I want to open this letter that Ben has shared with me and figure out, okay, Ben, what's going on? Why is it that you are resigning? And I come to a typical Microsoft verification page, exactly what I would expect to see. The very first piece of training that you want to discuss with your clients is whenever they're clicking on a link, always come up and look at that URL. So you can see that Ben has set this up as login.notlegitsite. Obviously, we don't want this particular server that we've set up for harvesting these attacks to be used in a nefarious way. But this looks like a Microsoft sign-in screen, and it's going to act like a Microsoft sign-in screen. I'm going to drop my password in here. It's going to bounce through, and it's going to ask me for authentication. I just got on my phone and approved sign-in. I don't know if everyone can see that. This is a little sketchy to get it to work with the camera. But it's going to ask me to put in that number in my authenticator app, which I just did. Put in 91, give it my Face ID, and my request is approved. This is the devil, by the way. Stay signed in. I'm going to go ahead and click that. For those of you who are able to go over to Ben's screen share, take a look at Ben's screen share, and Ben can walk you through the facets of this attack and how it was just carried out, how he grabbed the session token, and then take you into how he will log into my account.
Yep. So what I'm looking at now is I am picking up what Chip's password is and his username. Haven't gotten your session token quite yet there, Mr. Chip. So you might want to, there we go. Now I gotcha. So what I'm doing here is he's successfully signed into Office and has been redirected. And I have picked up his session token, which I'm going to display here now.
By the way, for those that can't or haven't figured it out, you can go to view options or share screens, click Benjamin Jones, and you'll be able to see his screen.
So I'm picking up a whole lot of really good information about this. I'm picking up his IP address, his username and password. So if I was a bad guy, I was thinking to myself, okay, it is Chip reusing this password other places like his bank account, Facebook, other places that I can get into just besides Office, most likely, probably yes. But if I just want to gain access to his Office account, the only thing that I'll have to do is pretty much just copy this cookie and drop it in to my browser. So I'm going to go ahead and select that here. I'm going to reshare my browser window. Everybody see that okay? And as you can see, I'm sitting at my Office sign-in. I hit refresh, and I'm clearly not signed in. I'm going to use this little cookie extension, very easy to get. I'm going to import. I'm going to copy the text that I just copied out of my Evil Gen X, and then I'm going to refresh. As you can see, I bypassed everything as far as authenticating any sort of MFA that he set up, because as far as Microsoft's concerned, I've already authenticated. So from here, I have access to all of his email, SharePoint, anything that I can get my hands on. And it's very quiet. According to Microsoft's logs, nothing happened. I just popped in normally. And it's just that easy. It takes no time at all.
Okay, thanks, Ben.
Yeah.
We'll jump back over to the presentation itself. So the purpose of the demonstration is really to show everyone how simple it is for an attacker to actually harvest that token. Ben, how much time did you put into crafting that email, just out of curiosity?
I took a little bit of pride in that one. So I did a little bit of Photoshop work, but if I was, it took me maybe like 30 minutes or so, but I would use that one email and send it out to, hundreds of thousands of people. And even if it wasn't intended for you, curiosity would have kicked in and you'd have probably just clicked on it just to see what was in there.
And what's the investment of time for you to set up the server? I'm sure it's pretty complicated to go ahead and set up an entire server platform in order to manage this, or let's just walk us through how that gets done.
It took me longer to pick out which virtual server I wanted to spin up than it would to get the software installed. Software installation takes about maybe 10 minutes, and it's completely open source, so it doesn't cost me a dime other than the cost of the domain and maybe the server, but I can spin up a free server pretty much almost on any platform, Azure, Linode, anywhere, AWS, for a free trial and use it and then forget about it.
And when you research here, Ben, you and I discussed that there are far more risks out there than just Microsoft 365. I think you sent me a table that, if I counted them correctly, there were close to 70 different SaaS products that could be hacked just with this one kit
Yes.
that you picked up. Is that correct?
And you can write your own as well. It's a simple YouTube video way of having the instruction on writing your own. It's what they call fishlet. And that is designed to emulate and respond like a normal sign-in of pretty much any SaaS product that you can think of.
So, Ben, are you a hands-on day-to-day software developer?
No.
So this doesn't take, and this is not a poke at you, but it doesn't take someone who has years of training as a hacker and software developer in order to execute the attack. Is that correct?
Correct. It just takes a little bit of very, very basic Linux knowledge and a little bit of knowledge about DNS servers. But there's guides out there that walk you through every single bit of it so that you're not having to learn from scratch.
Fascinating.
Chip, I'm looking at chat here. There's a couple of questions. Andy wants to know how this would have been reflected. I don't know if you're gonna get to this, then just tell me how this will be reflected in SaaS alerts. And then Chris asked a question: when Chip's token was stolen by Ben, do the logs show that the login was from Ben's device or from Chip's device, which created the initial token?
Yeah, so those are great questions. Let's get to them now. So the first question, read the first one again, Jim. Andy's question.
It was Andy's question. How would this be displayed in SaaS alerts?
Okay, so that's a great question. So here's the bad thing about session hijacking. Number one, MFA doesn't protect your customer, and conditional access doesn't protect your customer. As Ben stated, once he has that session token, as far as Microsoft's platform is concerned, or not just Microsoft, we don't want to pick on them. Google, Salesforce, GitHub, dozens, as we said, 70 different pre-built attack scenarios were provided in the kit that Ben is using here. So you don't have the traditional blocking mechanism that we became accustomed to for password spray attacks and brute force attacks. How this appears in SaaS alerts, no one, including us, can capture the precise moment where that attack occurs. But what we do capture is the signature of the behavior of what occurs afterward. We can see if the device, and this answers the second question, we can see if the device that is logged in is a device that's registered or not through our platform. For those folks who are on the call that are our partners, you may be aware of our Unify module, which takes data from RMMs and connects that and correlates it with the cloud events that occur. So we do see whether or not the login session is coming from a recognized device. We also see the changes that are typically made, and we'll see them very, very quickly, that the mailbox is being manipulated. Let me go back to my mailbox for just a second to show you this. You'll notice these two folders here. These are set up, these two icons. These are the actual names of folders that are added or that I added in order to do folder redirection. This can be as simple as a single period. So they become kind of innocuous that the regular established user or the authorized user of the account may not even notice that they're there. I threw this delta sign and an infinity symbol in just to see if I could pick anything out of the entire ASCII key set to set those up. And of course you can. So I think that answers both questions, Jim. We recognize these moments of compromise based upon the signature of the changes that occur in the account. So I do want to cover just two more slides here before we get into.
Chip,
Yeah, go ahead,
before you move on, I think it's important to note, for those that don't know, this is where respond would come in, right? Where essentially, as soon as this attack happens, we know, based on experience, what additional actions that hacker is going to take. That's what we recognize, and then therefore lock the account.
Correct. That's exactly correct. And really that leads us to the what next, right? The attack has occurred. When a loss is discovered, it's important, if that loss has or that compromise is discovered, it's important, if there's a loss, that you follow a few steps. You should immediately contact an attorney that specializes in cybercrime. If you have insurance, contact the insurance carrier. Get in and review the outbound emails from the compromised attack, because that's going to tell you if there were additional people who may be in danger of compromise, and you should be notifying them right away. And you should be prepared for a fairly long and involved process that's going to involve investigative authorities, your insurance carrier, your attorney. Once you're at this stage of the situation, you're really going to want your attorney and the insurance carrier to interact directly with the investigative team and guide you as the MSP in how you should be carrying forward. But the better approach is let's try and observe this compromise before a loss actually occurs. And as Jim alluded, this is where Respond, one of SaaS Alerts modules, kicks in. We can observe the behavior that indicates an unauthorized access and immediately and automatically revoke the account sessions, which is important. That would revoke the token that Ben just stole, block any additional account sign-ins, and change the password. Reviewing the mailbox rules, the profile, if there's any admin setting changes, is also an important consideration once you've seen that IOC. So the way to really stay ahead of this is, again, continuous monitoring 24/365 for any unusual account behavior. You can pre-harden system configurations as much as possible. Things like not allowing people to provide anonymous shares and other elements that are going to prevent data exfiltration. Obviously, carry cyber insurance. That's to help deal with financial loss, and have this very strict IT usage and data sharing policies. This last piece is the trading side. You know, as software, as MSPs, software developers, security experts in the space, we've all learned over time that the piece between the seat and the keyboard, the human being, is the real threat. You know, if we could prevent everyone from clicking on links that they're not 100% confident that they're expecting a document, or that it's a link that they should follow, it would really reduce the incidence of these kinds of attacks. I put in parentheses here, especially the C-suite. I say that because we've noticed over and over and again that it's often the people who are farthest removed from the day-to-day interaction with the technical aspects of the company who are most susceptible, because they're busy, because they're managing so many different layers of the organization. They'll see an email come through and they're going to go ahead and click on that email and find themselves in a phishing scenario. So SaaS Alerts, what can we do to help you with this? You know, one of the catchphrases that we use in discussing a product is, what good is an alarm if no one is watching? There are lots of different ways that you can set up Microsoft or other projects to send you alerts by email. But if there isn't somebody actively monitoring an email inbox 24 hours a day looking for alerts coming from your SaaS products, you really don't have anybody watching it for you. SaaS Alerts Manage is that robotic SOC analyst. It's taking in all that data and surfacing the information that should be of interest to the MSP or the MSSP who's using the tool set. And SaaS Alerts Respond is that robotic remediation expert that is going to shut those accounts down based upon the IOCs that are pre-built in the platform or that you can customize on your own. Respond today takes automatic action for everything 365. Over the course of 2024, we'll be expanding that to include Google. Look for those email forwarding rules, unapproved locations, MFA failures. Again, Respond will do that automatically for you, and you can bundle those together into a logical sequence so that if you see one happens and then another happens and then a third happens, hey, now you have a 90 or 95% probability that a successful compromise has occurred. And then Respond will block those sign-ins, expire the logins, and reset the passwords for you.
Chip, question for you.
Yeah.
Let's talk about like threat hunters, right? So if someone is using a SOC as a service, like what a threat hunter has to see in a token hijacking in order to take the action that Respond would, and
Yeah,
how long potentially that would take.
You're going to have an experienced threat hunter who knows to mentally correlate the different actions that are taken, perhaps a sign-in from a device that isn't pre-authorized, coupled with changes in the mailbox, coupled with a password change or multiple password changes that occur. A sign-in from an unapproved location, those are less common because hackers are getting more and more sophisticated. They're using the old botnets to actually buy and rent out localized IPs so that they can try and present themselves as if they're local to that business. But still important to look for those sign-in locations that are not approved. And by the way, you know, in the Microsoft console yourself, you can approve specific geolocations as well as you can do that in SaaS Alerts. But again, It's important to recognize that this token hijack approach to compromising an account bypasses all of that.
And one of the things you mentioned before, Chip, was Unify, right? That's obviously, if you're a SaaS search partner and you're using one of the leading RMMs out there, you should definitely leveraging Unify, which is going to correlate the device activity with the account activity. So if someone's logging in from a device that you don't recognize, then that is a variable that should be put in the respond rule that automatically locks that account.
That's
Because
right.
that is going to happen in a token hijacking. It's not going to be from your device in this situation, right?
Yep, that's absolutely correct. And Unify also allowed you to raise that probability. You know, noise is always an issue. People are concerned about that. They're worried about false positives. For people who are using an RMM solution and using SaaS Alerts Unify together, you can increase that probability that the compromise is real up to probably 99%. You know, Unify is a really interesting tool. It's the first tool that we've built in SaaS Alerts that really uses machine learning and makes suggestions inside of the module itself to offer suggestions on how to map devices to users based upon things like username, device name, the location it's coming from, the pattern of activity. It looks at all of those elements to bring together an automated mapping to make the process very, very easy for the MSP. So we wanted to also discuss Fortify, which is SaaS Alerts' newest module that allows you to apply hardening settings based upon the Microsoft Secure Score and CIS recommendations across all of your tenants. This is a terrific new product, a new module that we've released, which allows you to take the security recommendations and apply them to dozens or even hundreds of tenants at the same time, without having to sit through the individual 15, 20-minute experience of accepting policy recommendations from Microsoft on a tenant by tenant basis. It also tracks what we call drift, which is when a security score drops and regresses because someone else has come in and made policy changes that maybe not be approved by the MSP in a co-managed scenario, or perhaps somebody else in the MSP organization has made policy changes. Fortify helps you track those and restore and maintain the highest security settings that you can possibly set for the tenant. Okay, so that concludes the formal side of the presentation, and we're happy to take more questions and open the floor so we can answer your questions and help you follow up. So I'm going to stop screen sharing now so we can get back into the chat.
Someone asked, I don't know if Ben already got this. I think, yeah, about the license types with Respond. Looks like Ben's been taking care of that one.
Yep.
I've been putting up a good fight.
So I see Danny Chaplin dropped in star Entra. Danny, can you maybe expand on what it is you're driving at with Entra? We do pick up Entra IDs, by the way, also in Unify, if that's the question you're asking.
So Tim had a question. He said, doesn't a conditional access policy that limits by location and managed/compliant devices stop such attacks?
Managing compliant devices would help. Location is going to be completely indifferent. Once the session token is obtained, it doesn't matter what the location is. It's already been approved and has passed the preliminary authentication. Remember, the session access token is not the authentication piece. Microsoft's conditional access works in kind of a confusing, but I think important and fascinating way. The way conditional access functions is that it allows or requires the user to first successfully pass with username, password, MFA, and then it decides whether or not that user session can come in. The session token is then granted, and the session token itself is the piece that Ben just harvested.
And someone asked about what about YubiKeys? Are they phishing proof?
Unfortunately, they're not. I mean, you have the same situation. Once the authentication token is granted, that's the piece that the session token hijacking is after. That long string, for those of you who are watching Ben's screen as he went through that, YubiKey is another form of validation. So it's similar to MFA in that it's a more secure form of validation, but nevertheless, it's just the last form of validation to actually supply the access token.
Let's see here. It says, can Unify correlate to device and Intune MDM or is an RMM required?
Yep, that's a great question, Rob. So today, Unify is looking at the RMMs. We're assessing the value, if you will, of using Intune. I think we have that on our roadmap. We haven't set a time to start developing Intune into the product as well, but that is definitely on our roadmap. Andy asks, how long are session X tokens valid in a session? So that is a great question. I don't know if you remember earlier in the presentation when I had paused at the stay signed in button before I hit that, which is what actually kicked the token over to Ben. We've all experienced that Microsoft offers that stay signed in screen by default, and it's somewhat complicated to remove that. Once that stay signed in screen is there, Microsoft is now determining on its own how long to keep those session tokens open. And if you are all 365 users, I would imagine, so you're accustomed to going days or even weeks or months, as long as you have a continuous interaction with that session for that same tech and session token to remain open. That varies from product to product. This is something that's very easy to set for Google Workspace users. It's very easy for an administrator to come in and set a much shorter token time where they expire. SaaS Alerts itself in our own product, we are a SaaS company and our product is SaaS as well. We expire tokens after 30 minutes. So there's a wide range across the industry of how long session tokens remain open and the amount of flexibility you have to change those session token timeouts. So Andy also asks, is there a BEC where the login is not required to capture the phishing tokens? The auth tokens he puts as a correction. Yes, but those are the more traditional BECs, Andy, that were sort of predated the advent and then the ubiquitous usage of second session token harvest. Those are the kinds of situations where you have customers who won't even adopt MFA and they can get their passwords and their username credentials hacked through let's call them traditional means of password spray attacks and brute force attacks, which oddly enough, according to Microsoft, happened to Microsoft themselves less than a month ago.
And Tony's bringing up about intra CAE. I guess that's what is it, continuous access evaluation. He said it should be available on should mitigate this better, and said, can you comment on why this isn't working?
I'm not seeing Tony's question in there. Let me see if I can find it.
It's okay.
Is it a product related question?
Yeah.
It-
It's in the Q&A.
Okay, just saying high level for a second, because we can take the product questions up fine.
Sure.
Andy says, so the only method to respond to a token harvest is monitor the logs. That's the question.
Correct. Yeah, you've got to monitor the details of the account behavior so that you can be warned and sure that you've got an account that is behaving in a manner that is atypical and is providing the signature of a compromised account.
And
I see
then
Richard said you can disable the stay signed in feature in the Entra admin center. Yes, absolutely, Richard. And for those who have customers who are using Entra, would highly recommend that. There's a secondary method, which is quite a bit more complicated, that if you set up a custom sign-in screen for Microsoft 365, which I believe you need a business premium or E3 or E5 in order to even be able to do that, but you can set up your own screen and then eliminate that pop-up from even occurring.
Yeah. And what's frustrating, because I've heard this before too, is that there's a lot of end users out there that hate that because they love keeping these sessions open. Really, what it comes down to, it makes their lives easier in many cases.
Yeah, so Menu asks, this attack requires attackers to run some software on a target's machine. No, actually, it doesn't. The software that we referred to that Ben is running to perform this demo is actually running. Ben, is this running in Azure, or what data center are you running that server in?
It's a service, just a VPS service called Rack Nerd. And they have, you can, for about $11 a year, you can rent yourself a little server and do this. And it's all based off of that. The only thing I'm taking out of it is the cookie and just pasting it into a plugin on my browser that's free.
Right. So Menu, where the attack is running is typically in a virtual server environment. It could be stashed anywhere, and it's typically done that way so it can be torn up and taken down and reconfigured very quickly, and the attacker can move around. But it's a proxy attack. What it's doing is it's sitting in between the legitimate authentication from Microsoft, and it's passing data from the user's computer into the proxy over to Microsoft, where it's getting the prompt for MFA. And then once that prompt for MFA, it grabs the token and comes through.
So Andy said, would SaaS Alerts consider adding weights to log entries when a particular sequence of log entries occur, which are typically indicators of compromise?
So that's a respond functionality, Andy. When you create respond rules, and there are templates in SaaS Alerts that allow you to sort of mimic those the existing respond rules, and you set up a sequence of events, of log events that happen, and from that sequence you trigger the rule.
All right.
Okay.
So what are questions?
Oh, and Chip, I just wanted to let you know that, and let everybody else know that if you do set up the custom like background and logos and everything on your Microsoft sign-in, this service that I'm running will actually pull that same information and show that on your login screen. So don't think that that offers you a false sense of security. This will pull that too, which makes it even more insidious.
Great. A couple more things that just came in. I don't know if we took this question from Tony Thomas. Intra, it looks like conditional access is supposed to be available to all and should mitigate this better. Can you comment on why this isn't working? So that was a product question, I guess.
I see it's in the Q&A. Hang on. So Tony, I can't comment on why it isn't working, other than to say that I think most of the accounts that are monitored by our partners are not using those features of entry yet today.
Okay, and Chris came back and said, if you have time, either at the end, it would be beneficial to see the SaaS source logs for this attack.
I don't think that's something that we can do in the context of the presentation, Chris, but we can certainly follow up. Ben or one of our other technical teams can pull the logs so you can see what this looks like. Ben, we'll want to focus on the time slice where you actually logged in using the token and jumped on this particular account. But yes, we can provide that after the call.
Chris, are you an existing partner? Okay, great.
Perfect. Then we'll know how to get in touch with you, Chris.
Yeah. Okay. Anything else? Looks like we're good to go, Michelle.
All right. Thank you guys so much.
You're welcome. So there's two more that just popped in. Can the logs be shared with me as well? Yes, we'll share the logs with existing partners. Looks like Rudy is. And thanks for your comment, Lee.
Great. Thanks, everybody.
Thank
Have
you.
a great day.
Thanks all.
Thanks, guys.